Well, good morning. I'm Dean Sampson. I'm one of the new members of the board, and I'm here to give you the announcements for today. Last Saturday, there was a board retreat with the old board and the new board. And one of the tasks at that was it's actually the first board meeting, and the officers are selected. And for this year, Jeff Phillip is the president. I am the vice president. Herb Heathcote is the treasurer, and Andrea Barnes is the secretary. Next Sunday, the 14th, there is a special collection for Project Backpack, a program run by Helpline House, provides school supplies for K through 12 students in our community. We hope you will consider contributing to this cause by sending a check to the Cedars office or by contributing here at Cedars. And if you do send a check, put Helpline House in the memo line. On Wednesday, August 10th, Archer and the music committee will be hosting our next song circle at Cedars Center. This is the time for people to gather and get back into a regular singing practice. Thank you.
Good morning again, and welcome to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Johanna Munson, and I am pleased to be serving as worship associate alongside our minister, Reverend Zachary Vinson. It is a joy to be with you here in person today on this gorgeous summer day, and I welcome those of you who are joining the service virtually as well. We couldn't hold these services without the fantastic support from our volunteers. Many thanks to the sound team, the tech team, our musician Audrey Blair, and the setup team for turning this elementary school into a gymnasium, into a sanctuary. Let's pause to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of Coast Salish tribes, the homelands of the Suquamish, Duwamish, Klallam, and Chimicum people were ceded under duress through the Point Elliott and Point No Point treaties. We affirm Indigenous sovereignty, both past and present. This acknowledgement does not substitute for the need to build authentic relationships with modern-day members of these tribes and to learn about their living culture and history. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community in all the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness. We welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender, in the beauty of whom and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. You are invited to join us today and always with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. Now let us prepare for the service by listening to the Prelude, Alpine Meadows, composed by Philip Coverin and performed by Audrey Blair.
It is not by chance or fate that you find yourselves here this morning. Something inside of you stirred, and through your choice, you chose to come. Perhaps longing, perhaps seeking, perhaps having something to offer to others. Whatever the reason that called you here, welcome. Welcome to this journey into mountain spaces and fierce landscapes together. Welcome to this time of worship. Come, let us worship together. And now invite us to don our masks as we prepare to sing our opening hymn of the morning. Hymn number 20 found in our hymnals, Be Thou My Vision.
That music was just so beautiful. It transported me up to paradise on Mount Rainier and just seeing that beautiful Alpine scene, Alpine meadow up there. For me, however, stars are more of my spiritual practice. As human beings, we are but a blip, a speck, a mote of dust in the vastness of the universe. I first remember recognizing this fact at about age 11, gazing up in wonder at the incredible display of stars as I lay out on the rocks in front of the family cabin in Maine. We'd gather at this remote cabin 6 hours north of Boston every summer with cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents. One of my most anticipated traditions was that clear night when we could move mattresses outside, grab our sleeping bags and pillows, and spend the night out under the canopy of stars. Any of you familiar with Time of Wonder by Robert Mccloskey? The cabin is on the next island over from where the Mccloskey property is. So this is so meaningful, and that's what it's like. I would widen my gaze, trying to catch any shooting stars that appeared. We were often there about this time of year when the Perseid meteor showers occur. Gazing up into that miracle of stars twinkling above me, I remember being aware quite suddenly of my relative unimportance in the big scheme of things. It wasn't a feeling of despair or an existential crisis. I was 11. It was more like a recognition that I was this tiny, infinitesimal part of something unimaginably huge and profound. Maybe you have that feeling when you are alone in nature too. Are you inspired by mountains or water or maybe desert scenes? The feelings that arose were a sense of joy that I got to have this experience, along with a sense of belonging, even though the stars appeared so far away. Feeling connected, maintaining that sense of belonging, was a struggle for me as an adolescent and well into adulthood. I always felt different from my peers, quieter, book-oriented and shy, generally less confident. Having poor hearing in one ear made it challenging to be in groups, as I couldn't hear what someone on my right side was saying. I was happiest when I was part of a group engaged in an activity. Marching and symphonic band in high school were some of the best times I ever had. So the summer after my high school graduation, I had another experience with the stars. I don't remember exactly who I was with, likely other band members, or where the backyard we ended up in actually was. Someone had gotten hold of some magic mushrooms. And I was invited to partake in them and spend the night outside with this group. I'd never been into drugs, never smoked, so I think this was a bit of teenage rebellion, trying out that sense of impending freedom as I was about to leave Florida and move to college in Connecticut. I was kind of excited, thinking it might actually be a party scene, right? And it might feel like a normal teenager for once, doing what I thought others were up to all the time. I had no idea what these shrooms would do, and luckily, it was a safe environment. I remember chewing on the bits of dried something, and then just relaxing. There was some conversation happening around me, but I paid no attention to it. All I wanted to do was lie on my back and gaze up at the scene playing out above me. There, up above me, were my real friends, the ones who saw me for the amazing soul that I am, and that every bit of matter in the universe is. I belonged, I felt at peace, and I spent hours in that state. I probably didn't say a word that whole night, and it didn't matter. The next morning, we gathered our stuff and went back home, then soon dispersed to our various college or work destinations. I've never had a conversation with those people about their experiences, and I haven't taken any more of those hallucinogens. I wish that I had had the opportunity to share what I felt with those who were there. That comes from the adult perspective, where I've come to a place where now I am unafraid to share who I am. That was not who I was at 18. It's taken me decades to integrate that experience, to truly believe that I matter, that I can love myself for who I am. I don't need to fulfill someone else's expectations to be outgoing or like the same things. One aspect of being human that is essential for me, I've realized, is my need for spiritual connection in community, and that is a gift, not a burden or a weird thing. Looking at the night sky, seeing myself as part of the whole, knowing that I am the vibrational energy that all matter is, feeling loved, sharing who I am here with you all and out there as I live each moment. This is the gift that the stars have given me. Today, I dedicate the lighting of our flaming chalice to this sense of wonder that we as humans can gather in love and connection, individuals transformed by our relationship with nature. Please join me in repeating our affirmation. As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because we are one family, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be.
So today, the theme of our service is what we learn from mountains. And I often find if I want to learn something from someone, I step in their shoes. So today I thought it'd be fun if we tried to step in the shoes of a mountain. Now, none of us have that big a feat, I promise, but we're going to use our imaginations here. We're going to exercise our imaginations. And for this, the fun part is you can, as you feel so called, you may rise and stand. It's a bit of a stretching exercise, or you can do so from your seat, whatever you prefer. So, to step into the shoes of a mountain, first we must step. So, get your feet grounded. This will be our base. And you can get yourself some room if you like, you know. So, we're going to start from the base. And we're going to rise up. And then our rock faces, our two arms. We're going to reach high, 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 high up. As high as we can go. We're about 500 feet. Oh, we could go higher. It's about 1,000 feet. We're in the atmosphere now. And now, with our sturdy base and our rock faces, we're as big as mountains. It's like looking at the Cascades right now. And the lines by our feet, those might be the rivers running between us, the low valleys. Think about how high up you are right now. Stretch as far as you can. Silent as a mountain, but mountains go through some turbulence. And maybe one of your rock faces starts to jiggle a little bit. And now maybe we have a rock slide happening. Oh, and we've just lost one of our faces. But that enacted another rock slide. And now we are descending our mountains now. And let your rock faces hang. Think about how high mountains go up, all the ecosystems that were upon us as we embodied this mountain. There's a lot that goes on mountains, just like there's a lot that goes on within us. I don't see us too different from mountains, but sometimes it's good to use our imagination and think, what would I be like if I were a mountain? From what I saw, y'all are some pretty large mountains. Pretty large. So, thank you for joining me in stretching today. You may release your feet from the shoes of mountains. And hopefully we're a little more stretched out this morning, a little more relaxed. And feel free to become a mountain whenever you wish.
Ooh, that's a little loud there. Before I lead us in our spiritual moment, I just need a second to make sure this is still going to be in tune. Okay, we're good. If you feel comfortable, I'd like to invite you to join me in taking a deep breath in, and as you exhale, to let your eyes drift shut. To keep breathing in and out, in and out. Letting yourself relax. Maybe letting your shoulders drop, the muscles of your neck and face to release. Continue to breathe, letting yourself come into the presence of each other, yourself, and the rest of the world. Breathe silently now and feel this connection. Center yourself. As we are in this space together, I want to invite us again to activate our imaginations. If you can, I want you to imagine, however your mind works, imagine that you are at the edge, the precipice of a fierce landscape. Perhaps a mountain looms before you, its glacial peaks reflecting the sun. Or maybe you are on the threshold of a desert whose infinite sands stretch as far as your mind can perceive. Maybe it's the ocean's depths undulating before you. Whatever it is, imagine yourself there on the edge of this wild and untamed place. As you imagine, pay attention to what it is you notice. What senses about this place are coming to the forefront of your mind? What do you feel? What do you smell? What do you taste? What do you hear or otherwise perceive? Sit in this landscape. Notice these things in this time as I offer a short song for your contemplation. I now invite you to join in a continued musical meditation and reflection as we don our masks and prepare to sing our meditation hymn, hymn number 352 in our hymnal, Find a Stillness.
Let's let people flip to their, give people a moment.
So as individuals, we can dedicate ourselves to a cause that inspires us, whether that's immigration rights, preserving election integrity, get out the vote efforts, feeding people good food, or working to change climate policy, or all of these. When we come together with others, however, that energy multiplies and has a compound effect on ourselves, the others we engage with, and existence as a whole. Your contributions support a variety of outreach programs that benefit a wider circle than we can even imagine. If you are a first-time visitor, we are glad that you are here, and you can let the basket pass you by. Ushers, would you please pass the baskets?
During the second half of the 2nd century, Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius encouraged his adherents to, quote, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it. Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." He later added to this advice in a passage farther down, saying, "Remember this principle when something threatens to cause you pain. The thing itself was no misfortune at all. To endure it and prevail is a great good fortune." This advice given by Marcus Aurelius, I believe, captures a truth about our relationship to the natural world. If we think of the example of the sea crashing over the rocks, the sea crashes over the rocks, and yet the sea and the rocks, despite interacting with each other in a physical sense, are indifferent to each other. Sure, the waves subside when they crash against the rocks, and the rocks, little by little over time, are physically worn down by the waves. But this change is not met with an emotional reaction. if in turn we put ourselves in the place of the rocks and the sea was to crash over us, wave upon wave, we would likely be startled, perhaps even moved to fear that we might be swept out to sea or otherwise drown. But the waves don't care. Just as the rock doesn't care about the waves don't care about the rocks, the waves don't care about us, the rocks don't care about us, though to endure and prevail is a great good fortune still. To be met with indifference and prevail is a great good fortune. And the trick to obtaining this good fortune, I believe, is to pause and consider what we can learn from such forces. I grew up on the coast of Washington, a place where there is very progressive coastal erosion. And I know I've had a sermon in the past where I talk about that, and so I won't go into that today. But one thing about this time growing up there was what I learned about the force that the ocean is, the shaping force that it is in the world, and at the same time, completely indifferent to us. There's always been something awe-inspiring and baffling about the presence that the ocean offers me as a human. I've never been quite able to name it exactly, and I'm not convinced that I ever will. However, whatever this transcendent feature is, I feel it when I stand in the presence of the ocean. I feel it, and in feeling it, somehow am moved. I am changed. I am shaped by the indifference of nature. Spiritual writer Belden Lane labels such unnameable features of creation as apophatic. That is to say, they are features that are named through negation. This way of thinking about the world runs counter to the positivism that many of us, myself included, use to navigate the world. We like to say that things are like this or that, to use language to capture the experiences, and we oftentimes assume that the language we use is the same as the language other people use, though it's often not. One of the examples of positivism that came to mind as I was preparing was the idea of God from classical Western theology. In this view, it is often said in a positivist way that God has 5 essential features, that these are 5 functions that whatever God is, God has. That is, that God is omniscient or all-knowing, omnipotent or all-powerful, omnibenevolent, which is a fancy way to say all good, omnipresent, always present everywhere, and the last one is a necessary being, or that existence is an essential feature of God in this view. This is the positivist view. This approach that I'm referring to, though, has its limits. Language fails us. It's a way to try to define things with certainty, but often fails. The apophatic approach, on the other hand, resists such labels, and instead lets the true nature of the object, God in this case, remain a mystery. The apophatic approach is one that invites us into the presence of wonder. It's an approach that invites us into direct experience and recognizes that labeling things will always fall short. Lane explains what he means by saying God can only be met in emptiness by those who come in love, abandoning all effort to control, every need to astound. The presence of God may, as often as not, be perceived as an absence. The presence of God may, as often as not, be perceived as an absence. In many spiritual traditions, fierce and wild places like mountains and deserts represent an invitation into a deeper contemplation. These places offer us a chance to set aside all pretense of control and come into the presence of the unknown, and through such an encounter, be transformed. It is the transformative feature of such encounters that is the subject of Belden Lane's book, The Solace of Fierce Landscapes, exploring desert and mountain spirituality. Belden, who is a Presbyterian minister and academic, began writing this book in a time when he was struggling to find meaning and comfort in life. His mom had gone through a long battle with Alzheimer's, which he was the caregiver through, followed by her eventual death by cancer. In an attempt to make sense of this hardship he experienced, Belden followed an internal impulse that he had, calling him into the solitude of the wilderness. He set out on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and throughout the Middle East, visiting many of the sites that scriptures make reference to: Mount Sinai, traveling through the desert, visiting the same rivers. This impulse was the same impulse that had drawn other seekers into the wilderness through the millennia in search of wisdom and meaning and healing. And he answered the call. In his book, Reverend Lane explores stories from many traditions: Jesus' ascent to the mountain, the story of Moses, Buddha teaching his disciples to be like mountains, and many other cultural myths and folklores from traditions around the world. All this in an attempt to understand what it was that was calling him to these fierce places during this time. The fierceness of the mountain has a way of causing us to forget about the trivial details of our lives. The gift that these places offer us is holy silence. In recognition of this, Belden comes to believe that this silence, quote, God's silence, is a function of our broken capacity to hear, joined with the awesome mystery of the divine. At that point in human experience, where language ends, we find ourselves at the foot of an inaccessible mountain, at the edge of a marvelous desert. No matter how much we might be impacted by the world around us, and I believe we are impacted quite a bit. We're impacted by the waves, the mountain, the ocean, or for some of us, maybe even God. The world, for all intents and purposes, is indifferent to us. The waves don't care, the rocks don't care, the sun and stars don't care. The mountain doesn't care. It's true that we as humans, as agents in the world, can have an impact on these things. The unfolding effects of human carbon consumption can attest to that. But when the hurricanes, wildfires, and other climate-related catastrophes strike, they don't care whether it's in my backyard or across the world or in your yard. They don't care. And unlike the rocks that Marcus Aurelius described as being unmoving, when such events happen, we are impacted. We are moved, even if these events are indifferent to us. The mountain might not care about us, but we care about the mountain. In such encounters, we are offered a chance to be human, to be humbled, and to embrace the possibility of change and transformation. I think this indifference can be really hard for us. We are all used to feeling special. I know we've heard a lot in the last few years about snowflakes and people who are so special and need to be held gently. So much so that discovering in the presence of a larger force that we aren't special can be unsettling. When we are made to feel small, when we recognize that there is an indifference, that can be unsettling. Belden sees this unsettling as a gift, however. He writes, "So often, people presume themselves to be at the center of everyone else's attention, performing for an audience that isn't there. Their chief loss in the process is missing the gift of blessed indifference that was being offered to them all along. We are saved in the end by the things that ignore us." I want to share that quote again. "So often people presume themselves to be at the center of everyone else's attention, performing for an audience that isn't there. Their chief loss in the process is missing the gift of blessed indifference that was being offered to them all along. We are saved in the end by the things that ignore us." There is a blessing in being ignored. There is a gift in indifference. Not indifference to one another, to each other or to the world, but instead the indifference that the world has to offer us. By the indifference that humbles us and brings us into direct experience with the natural world and helps us realize just how small we are. We are called to care for each other and the world, but the mountain doesn't care. Last summer, I had an opportunity to experience some of this indifference in the mountains. I took some time in June and traveled just outside of Denver, Colorado, to meet up with my mentor, Lucas. We rented a cabin up in the mountains and planned to spend several days in reflection and spiritual practice together. The setting was quite remote and possessed a surplus of sweeping vistas and craggy peaks to explore. We took advantage of this topography throughout the days that we were there by taking short hikes. These weren't grueling hikes by any means. They weren't long treks through the wilderness where we were gone for days, but more the sort of hikes where you just bring a water bottle and a journal because you're going to sit somewhere and write and talk together. We would set out from the cabin and find one of the many nearby trailheads and make our way to some spot, somewhere with a nice view, and sit and talk and write and be. The thing that I remember most immediately about this experience, about these little hikes that we took, especially during those first few days of being at the cabin, was how hard to breathe it was. We were just above 9,000 feet in elevation, and at that height, the oxygen levels get much lower than my coastal lungs are accustomed to. I found myself coming up little stretches of trail that here I would be able to do no problem, now gasping for breath. I found myself moving slower and slower, slower than I normally would hike. Step by step, I continued to trod at a snail's pace. And as I did, I noticed things. I began to notice the green and orange lichen that were growing on rocks. I noticed the delicate wildflowers that lined the edge of the trail. I noticed the subtle tracks where animals, deer most likely, had come through, cutting across the trail, leaving a mark where they tread. I slowed down and noticed these things. Because of the pace that the low oxygen caused me to move at, I noticed more of these tiny details than I believe I would have otherwise. I was changed. I adapted to the altitude. The altitude didn't adapt to me. The mountain doesn't care. In my meditation on engaging with forces that are indifferent to us, I have come to believe there is something unique in the human capacity to be transformed by these situations. The mountains, desert, ocean, and creator, if you will, may not be changed by our engagement with them, may not even realize that we exist. But we, on the other hand, are changed by them. When we are confronted with the indifference of the created world, we are forced to respond. Thinking back to the quote from Marcus Aurelius, perhaps this is the great good fortune he was referring to when he said, "To be met with indifference and prevail is a great good fortune." Perhaps it is in meeting forces that are indifferent to us and still persisting that we are expanded. The indifference of fierce landscapes brings us to the edge of ourselves. They challenge our notion of what is possible and help us humbly accept our limitations. According to Lane, being brought to the end of oneself is terrifying and an enthralling possibility that the mountain enjoins with us. Here it is that we enter the interior wilderness far more fearful and promising than anything charted on terrestrial maps. The wildest, most dangerous trails are always the ones within. This is what the mountains have to offer us. A chance to better understand our sense of possibilities and limitations, to grow and be challenged. Fierce landscapes are places where our egos can come into contact with non-ego, and in such a meeting, be humbled. The mountain doesn't care, but we do, to the glory of life. At this time, I would like to invite us to again don our masks as we prepare to sing our closing hymn of the morning, hymn number 21 in our hymnals, "For the Beauty of the Earth." And please rise as you feel called.
As we extinguish the chalice, please recite responsively. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. The warmth of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our service has ended, but our service to the world and one another begins anew. As we go forth, may we be open to the possibility of transformation that the indifference of the world offers. May it be so.